The night sky burned with streaks of light as the alien ship tore through the atmosphere like a wounded star, its metal skin glowing red and silver as it screamed across the heavens. The people of the valley below looked up in terror and wonder, as a trail of fire split the clouds in two, and the ground shook like thunder rolling through the bones of the earth. When the ship finally struck the desert floor, the impact sent a wave of light across the dunes, scattering sand and stone like a storm of gold dust, and when the fire faded, the world went silent for a breathless moment. From the wreckage rose a figure tall and radiant, her armor made of glass like crystal that shimmered in shades of blue and violet, her eyes cold and bright as distant moons. The alien princess stood untouched by the flames, her long silver hair floating weightlessly around her face, as if gravity itself bent to her will. Beside her stepped a creature unlike any seen on earth, a lion but not of flesh and blood. Its mane glowed faintly with electric blue light, and its eyes shone with intelligence and calm, like a guardian forged from starlit. The people who had gathered near the crash site did not dare approach. Some thought she was an angel fallen from the sky, others whispered that she was a god or a curse. She looked at them all without a word, her expression unreadable, her presence both beautiful and terrifying. Her lion paced beside her, its paws leaving behind small bursts of blue fire with each step. The sand hissed beneath its touch, and the air trembled with quiet power. As rescue teams arrived and soldiers surrounded the area, the princess remained still, her gaze fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something that had been lost to the stars. She spoke a few words in a language none could understand, her voice soft yet commanding, like wind moving through metal. The lion growled low, and the soldiers instinctively stepped back. No weapon felt strong enough to threaten what they saw before them. Hours passed and the night deepened, yet she made no attempt to communicate. No gesture of peace or fear, she only looked upward as if waiting for a signal that would never come. Her ship was beyond repair, its glowing engines now dim embers buried in the sand. She was stranded, but she showed no sign of despair, only a calm that seemed almost unnatural. The lion nuzzled against her side, its body pulsing with faint energy like a living star, and for a moment a trace of something almost human flickered in her eyes, perhaps affection, perhaps memory, but then it was gone, replaced by that same cold, distant stare. She raised her hand to the sky, the symbols on her armor flickering like fading constellations, and the crowd stepped back again, not out of fear but out of awe. No one yet knew that this fallen princess, who looked untouchable, who seemed made of perfection and pride, would soon face a choice that would shatter the illusion of her strength and reveal the fragile truth hidden beneath her light. The dawn spread across the desert like liquid gold, melting over the broken ship and the still sand. The alien princess stood where she had stood all night, unmoving, untouched by hunger or fear, her silver hair swaying softly in the dry wind, her glowing lion lying beside her, with its eyes half closed as if it were dreaming of another world, far from this lonely blue planet. The soldiers who had surrounded her through the darkness now watched from a distance, their weapons lowered, not from orders but from AHO, for none could look at her and see an enemy. News of her arrival had spread through nearby towns. People gathered at the borders of the restricted zone, some holding cameras, others simply standing in silence, watching this vision of another world that had fallen among them. Her image filled screens across the globe, and while governments argued and scientists speculated, the princess said nothing. She turned only once to look at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over them like the passing of a comet, and for that brief moment every person who met her eyes felt the weight of something ancient, something that had seen more than they could ever imagine. The lion rose and stretched its massive body, rippling with light and sound, a low hum echoing from its chest that made the air tremble. The princess placed a hand upon its mane, and it calmed, instantly lowering its head, as if bowing to her command. She began to walk slowly across the sand, her bare feet leaving no prints. The lion following close behind. The soldiers parted in silence, letting her pass, not because they were ordered to, but because none dared to stop her. As she moved through the wreckage of her ship, she touched its scorched metal hull and murmured softly in her own tongue. The words were like music, haunting and full of sorrow, though no one could understand them. Her fingers traced the alien symbols burned into the surface, as if she were saying goodbye to something far greater than the ship itself, perhaps a home, perhaps a destiny. She could no longer reach. The wind carried her voice, and it faded into the vastness of the desert, leaving behind only silence. When Night fell again. She made camp near the edge of a dried riverbed. The lion lay beside her, glowing faintly enough to keep the darkness away. She gazed up at the stars for hours, motionless, her face unreadable, though her eyes reflected a sadness that no one had seen before. Maybe she was thinking of her kingdom, maybe of her people, or maybe of how small the universe had suddenly become for one who had once ruled the heavens. The lion nudged her hand, and she looked down at it, her fingers brushing its mane. For a moment there was warmth between them, like the memory of love, long forgotten, but it vanished when thunder echoed in the distance. Dark clouds gathering over the horizon. She rose slowly, her expression turning sharp as lightning flickered across the sky. The storm was coming, and though she did not yet know it, the storm would test her heart in ways her royal power never could. The storm came with no warning, tearing across the desert like a living beast, its voice a howl that shook the broken earth. The alien princess stood tall against the wind, her long silver hair whipping around her face, her crystal armor glowing faintly with every flash of lightning beside her. The great lion roared, its mane flickering like blue fire, as the first drops of rain struck the ground, hissing into steam. The dry riverbed began to fill with rushing water, faster than any storm she had ever seen on her distant world, and the scent of ozone filled the air. The wind carried sand like knives cutting against her skin, yet she did not move. She watched the sky as if the chaos were a message from the stars, as if the universe itself were calling her to rise above this fragile planet. But the lion growled and nudged her leg, urging her toward shelter, its instincts older and wiser than pride. She ignored it, her eyes fixed on the heavens, searching for something that could not be seen, something she had lost in the fall, her home, her people, her throne, perhaps even her sense of purpose. The lightning grew closer, striking the ground with blinding light. The ship wreckage cracked under the weight of the storm, pieces of alien metal carried away by the flood. The lion roared again, its voice echoing like thunder, but the princess still stood, unmoving, until a massive surge of water crashed through the canyon walls and the riverbed became a torrent in seconds. The lion leapt back, barely escaping the current. The princess stumbled for the first time, her strength faltering as the ground shook beneath her feet. The lion turned toward her, its glowing eyes wide with urgency, and it stepped forward to help, but the water rose higher, faster, swallowing the land between them. She reached out a hand, and for a heartbeat their fingers and fur nearly touched, but the next wave struck hard, pulling the creature off balance and dragging it down into the swirling flood. Its roar faded into the storm, the blue light of its mane flickering beneath the surface before vanishing into the depths. For the first time the princess cried out, her voice breaking through the wind, a single sound that carried across the desert, raw and desperate. She stepped toward the water, but the current was too strong, and the debris from her ship spun like blades. She hesitated only a moment, but that moment was enough. For fear to find her, fear of losing everything again, fear of facing weakness, she turned away, trembling, her hands clenching at her sides. The storm roared louder, drowning the silence that filled her heart. When the lightning faded and the rain slowed, she stood alone on a high ridge, watching the river twist and darken beneath her. The glow of her lion was gone. The world was quiet except for the soft patter of rain on metal. Her reflection shimmered in the water, a queen without a kingdom, a warrior without courage, and as dawn approached, she whispered one word into the wind, a name that no one would ever know, then turned her back on the place where her only companion had fallen. Far beyond the crash site, the storm had not gone unnoticed. A human soldier stationed at a remote outpost watched the sky flash and pulse with strange light. He had seen many storms before, but never one that carried such a strange glow within its clouds, like lightning mixed with starlight. His name was known only by his rank and his duty. He had been sent to observe the fallen alien ship and report movement, but as the thunder grew louder, he felt something deeper, pulling at him, a sense that someone or something out there was in danger. The wind howled through the outpost, rattling metal panels and shaking the antennas that clawed at the storm. He pulled on his gear, his boots sinking into the mud as he stepped outside. The rain struck hard, like shards of glass. He could barely see more than a few feet ahead, but then a flash of blue light cut through the darkness down in the valley near the wreckage. It flickered, weak and desperate, like the last breath of a dying star. He knew instantly it was not lightning. He ran toward it without waiting for orders, without thinking at all, only moving with instinct. The riverbed that had once been dry was now a raging flood, tearing across the sand. The current carried debris and glowing fragments from the alien ship, sparks and smoke rising each time they struck the rocks. The soldier slid down the ridge, grabbing at anything that would hold his weight, until his boots hit the edge of the water, and there, he saw it, a massive lion-like creature thrashing against the current, its mane flickering blue, then dimming, then glowing again. The beast was fighting, but the flood was stronger, pulling it further downstream toward the jagged ruins of the ship. Without hesitation, he threw off his rifle and dove into the water. The cold hit him like ice slicing through his armor, but he forced his way forward, the current dragging him down again and again. He kicked and swam until his hands brushed against something smooth and alive. The creature's mane, it turned its head toward him, its eyes glowing faintly as if it could still sense hope even through pain. He wrapped one arm around its neck and began to pull, using all his strength, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming against the weight of the storm. Wave after wave crashed over them, the world a blur of light and water and sound, but somehow he kept going until his feet found the riverbank and he dragged the lion onto the sand, both of them collapsing breathless under the hammering rain. He coughed and rolled onto his back, staring at the sky that seemed to split in two with thunder. The lion lay beside him, still breathing, shallow but alive, its chest rising and falling with faint light pulsing from within. He reached out and rested a trembling hand on its mane. The warmth surprised him. It was not just energy, it was life. It was something sacred, something that did not belong to this world, yet trusted him enough to stay. He looked across the dark valley, the wreckage. He could not see the princess, but he felt her presence somewhere in that endless storm, a shadow watching from above, and though he did not know her, he already knew what she had done, and that he could never forgive it. The storm eased slowly, its fury fading into a tired drizzle. The wind no longer screamed, it only whispered across the soaked desert. The soldier sat beside the massive lion, his breath shallow, his uniform heavy with rain. The creature's glowing mane flickered weakly, its once brilliant light dimming like a dying ember. He pressed a hand to its chest, feeling the faint rhythm of a heartbeat that pulsed like distant thunder. It was alive, but barely. He looked around the flooded valley for any sign of shelter, and found only the wreckage of the alien ship, half buried in mud and sand. With effort he stood and began dragging the creature toward a broken section of the hull. Each step a battle against exhaustion, his legs shaking, his arms burning from the strain. The lion groaned softly, a sound that sent a strange ache through his chest. He spoke to it, though he knew it could not understand. "Hold on, buddy. Don't you quit on me, not after that fight." His voice cracked, and the rain mixed with sweat and blood that trickled from a cut on his forehead. He stumbled once, but kept going until they reached the hollow of the ship inside. The wreckage, the air was warm and metallic. Faint lights still glowed along the walls, pulsing weakly like the heartbeat of a dying machine. He found a small dry corner and laid the lion down, its breathing shallow but steady. He tore off part of his jacket and used it to wipe away the grime from its face, then built a fire from broken scraps of insulation and old wiring. The flames flickered dimly, reflecting off the alien metal. The heat began to fill the space with fragile life. He sat beside the lion, resting his back against the wall, watching the creature's chest rise and fall, each breath a small victory. He reached for his canteen, poured water into his palm, and let a few drops fall into the lion's mouth. The creature's tongue flickered faintly as if it remembered thirst. He smiled, tired and broken, but somehow filled with purpose again. "You're gonna be all right, big guy, you just hang on." "All right," he whispered, and for a moment the lion's glowing eyes opened, meeting his gaze with quiet understanding. Hours passed, the storm outside fading into silence. He felt sleep pulling at him, but he resisted, watching the lion's glow pulse in rhythm with the fire. He thought of his home, of the years spent fighting wars on Earth, for causes that never seemed to matter, and now, here he was saving something not human, something born among stars. He wondered what it meant, why it felt so right. Maybe because saving something pure was the first thing that had ever made sense. When dawn came, pale light seeped through the cracks in the metal. The soldier was half asleep, sitting upright, his hand resting gently on the lion's mane. The creature stirred, its chest rising with stronger breaths, the blue glow of its body bright once more. He smiled weakly, knowing they had both survived the storm together, and though he did not yet know it, this bond born from chaos would change both their lives forever. The sun rose high above the desert, turning the soaked sand into glittering gold and steam. Rising like smoke, the wreckage of the alien ship shimmered under the morning light, and the air smelled of metal and dust. The soldier stirred from a shallow sleep, his body aching, every muscle sore, his mind heavy with dreams that felt more like memories of roaring water and desperate struggle. He blinked and turned to the creature lying beside him, the lion, still breathing strong, its mane glowing once more, a soft, steady pulse that filled the air with warmth. It was alive, it was healing. He smiled faintly, his eyes, half closed with exhaustion and wonder. He had seen war and pain, but never beauty like this. The creature's light danced across his face like sunrise. It made him feel small and infinite. At once he whispered softly to it, "You made it, buddy, you really made it." He reached out, brushing its mane with care, and the lion leaned into his touch, a deep rumble vibrating through its chest like distant thunder. It was a sound of trust, a sound that somehow made his heart ache with something he could not name then. He felt it, a shift in the air, a presence that made the hairs on his neck rise. He turned and saw her standing at the edge of the wreck, her figure framed by the morning light, the alien princess, her silver armor glimmering, her eyes cold and unreadable, her expression carved from stone. She moved with the grace of a storm, her every step silent but powerful. The lion lifted its head, sensing her before seeing her, and its glow dimmed slightly, as if caught between loyalty and fear. The soldier rose to his feet, his hands instinctively clenching, though he had no weapon. Ready, he stood between her and the lion, his body weary but firm. She watched him, her gaze like frost cutting through his resolve. And yet she said nothing, only stared at the lion, then at him, then back again, as if weighing something unseen. The silence between them felt endless, heavy with meaning and judgment. At last, she spoke, her voice soft like wind over broken glass, her words slow and distant as if from another time. The sound of her language, strange yet sorrowful, he could not understand, but he knew what she wanted. She was calling for the lion, commanding it to return to her. The creature stirred, its eyes flickering between the two of them, torn by instinct and emotion. The soldier shook his head. "No," he said, "you left it to die. You don't get to take it back now." His words were calm, but his heart raced. The princess tilted her head, her expression shifting for just a breath, from anger to confusion to something almost human. Regret, maybe. She took a slow step forward, but the lion moved closer to the soldier, lowering its head as if making a choice, and the faintest hint of pain crossed her face. She stopped, her hand trembling for a moment, before falling to her side. She turned away, her silver hair catching the light like broken glass, and without another word she walked back into the desert, leaving behind the echo of her pride and the silence of loss. The soldier stood still, watching the alien princess disappear into the vast horizon, her silver figure fading into the rising heat, until she was no more than a mirage swallowed by the desert. The air felt heavy, the silence deep, like the world itself was holding its breath. He turned slowly to the lion that now sat beside him, its glowing mane bright again, shimmering in hues of blue and gold. It looked at him with calm, steady eyes, and for the first time, he understood that the creature had made its choice. It had chosen him. He knelt beside it, resting his hand on its shoulder, feeling the warmth of its heartbeat. Beneath his palm he whispered softly, almost to himself, "Well, I guess that settles it. You're with me now." The lion rumbled low in its chest, not a growl, but something closer to a sigh, a sound of peace. He smiled, the exhaustion of the night fading away, replaced by a strange sense of belonging. He had saved many lives before, but this felt different. This felt pure, as if the universe itself had placed this creature in his path for a reason. As the sun climbed higher, he gathered what little supplies he had, and began to move away from the wreck, the lion following close behind, its paws silent in the sand, its body moving with grace and strength, though it still bore marks from the storm. Together they walked toward the outpost, miles away, the heat shimmering around them like liquid fire. The soldier stumbled at times, his legs weak, but each time he looked back and saw the lion still there, steady as a shadow, and somehow he found the strength to keep going. When they reached the edge of the dunes, he turned for one last look at the crash site, the broken ship. Now nothing more than a skeleton of light and memory. The storm had washed away all signs of what had happened, except for a faint trail of blue glow along the ground. Where the lion had once struggled, it looked almost like a path leading away from pain, toward something new. He breathed deep and felt a calm he had not known in years. At the outpost, the other soldiers stared in disbelief as he approached with the alien beast walking peacefully beside him. Weapons were raised, voices shouted, but he raised a hand and said, "No, this one's with me." And somehow the way he said it left no room for argument. The commander demanded answers, but the soldier said nothing, just led the lion to an open hangar, where it lay down content, as if it had finally found home. That night, he sat beside the creature, under the stars, listening to the wind whisper across the dunes. He thought about the princess, her cold eyes, her quiet sorrow, and he wondered if she had truly left for good, or if she watched from the heavens above. But even if she did, he knew one thing with certainty: he would protect the lion, not as property, not as duty, but as a promise between two survivors of worlds that had both been broken for. Across the desert where the horizon met the bleeding sky, the alien princess walked alone, her armor dulled by dust, her once perfect grace now heavy with silence. She moved like a ghost through the wasteland, leaving behind faint traces of blue light in the sand that vanished with every step. The sun burned her pale skin and the wind tore at her silver hair, but she did not stop. Her mind replayed the storm again and again, the sight of the lion drowning the soldier's hand, reaching through the flood, his face carved with determination and mercy. The image haunted her like a wound that would not heal. She had been raised to believe that emotion was weakness, that compassion was a flaw unfit for royalty. Her people taught her to command, not to feel, and to sacrifice anything that did not serve power. Yet now that belief crumbled beneath the weight of what she had seen: a human soldier risking his life for a creature that was not his own, showing more honor than a princess who once ruled among the stars. She clenched her fists, the sound of her breath harsh in the empty air. She wanted to understand why his actions had shaken her so deeply. Why guilt now pressed against her chest like iron. Night came, and the stars returned sharp and bright across the endless sky. She stood at the edge of a canyon and gazed upward, her eyes reflecting the constellations that once guided her through galaxies. They seemed so far away now, like memories she could never reach again. She whispered the name of her home softly into the wind, the sound trembling with sorrow and regret. Her voice broke, and for the first time since her fall she allowed herself to weep. The tears shimmered faintly, glowing as they touched the sand before fading into darkness. In that quiet moment she understood what her power had cost her. The titles, the crowns, the endless duty had built walls around her heart. She had abandoned the one being that had ever been truly loyal, and in doing so she had lost more than a guardian. She had lost herself. She closed her eyes and saw the soldier, again, his hand resting on the lion's mane, his face calm and resolute. She felt a flicker of envy and admiration, for he had something she never possessed: the courage to love without reason. The wind grew colder as dawn approached, and she knew her time on this planet was ending. She activated a small beacon hidden beneath her armor, its faint pulse reaching the skies, a signal to her kind that she was alive but would not return in triumph. Only in humility. She looked once more toward the horizon, where the soldier and the lion now lived, bound by a bond stronger than pride. She whispered farewell in her native tongue and turned her face to the rising sun, her form dissolving into light that scattered across the desert like falling stars, leaving behind only the faint echo of her last breath carried by the wind. The years passed like whispers over sand. The desert healed, and the wreck of the alien ship was buried beneath layers of time. The soldier never spoke of what happened that night, not to his comrades, not to the officials who came asking questions. The lion stayed with him always, its glowing mane fading over time until it shone only in darkness. Like the last memory of a dying star, they lived quietly at the edge of a forgotten outpost where the sky stretched wide and endless, and the silence felt alive. Each morning the soldier rose before dawn, watching the sun break over the dunes, and each night he sat beside the lion, listening to the soft hum that came from its chest, a sound like a heartbeat mixed with distant thunder. He found peace there, a kind of stillness he had never known. In war sometimes he would speak softly to the lion, telling it stories of his life, of places far from the desert cities, of glass oceans that sparkled like mirrors. He would laugh quietly at his own words, and the lion would tilt its head as if understanding every one of them. Travers began to pass through the valley, speaking of a glowing beast that guarded the sands, a creature neither wild nor tame, guided by a man with eyes like storms. They said he could calm tempests and heal wounds with a touch. No one could prove the tales, but they grew with each telling. Some said the lion was a guardian left by gods. Others whispered that it was the spirit of a fallen star. Few knew the truth, that it was simply the bond between a man and a creature born from different worlds, bound by survival and trust. The soldier aged, his hair turning gray, his hands rough and scarred, yet his eyes held the same quiet fire he had on the night of the storm. The lion grew slower, its once brilliant light soft and steady, like the glow of embers near the end of their flame. One night, under a sky filled with stars, the soldier sat beside his companion, the cool wind brushing against them. He looked up and thought he saw something moving among the stars, a trail of silver light arcing across the heavens, and he knew without doubt that it was her, the princess, watching from afar perhaps, proud perhaps, sorrowful perhaps. But he smiled and placed a hand on the lion's mane. Feeling its slow heartbeat, he whispered, "Thank you, my friend, for staying." When no one else did, the lion leaned against him, closing its eyes, and together they sat until dawn, when the first rays of light touched the horizon, and the desert seemed to hum with life. After the soldier was gone, people still spoke of him and the lion. Some said they could see two figures walking across the dunes at sunset, one man, one beast, both glowing faintly beneath the fading sun, and the story became legend, a tale told to remind all who listened that heroism was not born of crowns or bloodlines, but of compassion and courage, the kind that reaches across worlds and changes everything forever.